Finally, ecologically, humans and livestock act as an evolutionary team or unit or force. They act on each other and on their surrounding environments. And that is perhaps the way we've been talking about it most here, but all of these are potential ways of conceptualizing this relationship. Now I want to switch to grasses. And if we think that humans and livestock have got a symbiotic relationship, we can also say that livestock and grasses have a symbiotic relationship, or perhaps it's more accurately put as a coevolutionary relationship. Grasses have a 40 million year long evolutionary history. That makes them significantly older, so to speak, than the livestock that we're talking about, most of the fauna that we're concerned with here. Grasses have been around for an extraordinarily long time. They are adapted to disturbance from herbivores, drought, and fire. We talk about disturbance regimes, right? The grasses have essentially evolved in circumstances in which if they could not survive being eaten by an herbivore, they would not persist. And by herbivore here, I mean a lot more than just livestock. Horses and cows are herbivores, but so are grasshoppers and termites. And basically anything that consumes them, consumes these plants is an herbivore. Drought. The native home of a lot of grasses are climates in which drought is a regular occurrence. And grasses have evolved to survive prolonged periods of low moisture. And that's an important part of what makes them significant evolutionarily. And finally, fire. Why is grass so nicely adapted to fire? Anybody know? Yeah. Okay, partly it's because it can grow back quickly after a fire, more quickly than a lot of other plants. But that doesn't help unless you also survive the fire in the first place, right? Grasses, the growth points of grasses, of many grasses, are just below the surface or just at the surface of the ground. A fire that moved across that landscape, the heat from the fire rises, obviously, and if you can keep your growth point out of that heat, you can lose everything above it, but not die. A lot of other plants don't have that. Their growth points are above ground, they're exposed to the heat of the fire, and they die. Grasses display a remarkable variety of strategies for survival and reproduction. It's the most widespread plant family in the world. Here we get a sense of both the variety and the sort of special features of grasses. I've told you already, I really like grasses. I apologize if you find that weird or you don't care about it. I'll do what I can to persuade you that it matters, but maybe I'll fail. I don't know. You begin to see here, there's the happy Hereford cows on the nice green grass. That's obviously a landscape that gets a fair amount of moisture, but notice that grasses are growing in all positions on that landscape, right? Different kinds of grasses. The grasses in the nice green pasture where the Herefords are all hanging out are different from the grasses growing on the foothills in the background. The grasses down here like the conditions where there's probably more fertile soil and more moisture. They don't mind those cows, provided the cows don't get too out of hand. The grasses up on the foothills are able to grow in circumstances where there's probably much less moisture, completely different soils, probably much less fertile soils. Here you get a picture of, these are the root systems of prairie plants. These are grasses in prairies. The key point to notice, there's actually more plant below ground than there is above ground. If you pull those plants and dry them and weigh them, the roots are significantly greater than the stuff above ground, which has a number of virtues. One is, you see the growth points there just below the surface of the ground. The tolerance to fire and grazing both are a function of that, right? A cow can come along and eat everything above ground, or down to an inch or so, and the plant, provided it gets a chance to regrow, can regrow because most of it is below ground and protected. Here you see a picture of a fire. This graph down here is rainfall in semi-desert grasslands in the southwestern United States from 1890 to 2000, measured against average. And the reason I put it up here is just to give you a sense of the kinds of extremes that grasses can tolerate. Here you see 7 straight years of drought, including 1 year of extreme drought, followed by the wettest year in the recorded history of the Southwest. These types of extreme variation are characteristic of a lot of the climates in which grasses survive. They can actually, again, they can go dormant if there's no rain. They can lose everything above ground. Below ground, moisture will persist much longer, and when they get some rain, they can come back. The importance of grasses here. Now, maybe you'll start to understand why I care so much. 5 out of the world's 12 leading crops are members of the grass family: wheat, corn, rice, barley, and sorghum. This is the family of plants from which we have derived the crops that feed us, by and large. Without them, humanity would be a completely different thing. They supply over half of all the calories consumed by humans. They are a key forage for many domesticated animals. And finally, grasslands are critically endangered worldwide. They tend to be, they're not protected very often. The respective amount of the world's grasslands that are protected compared to, say, the world's forests is teeny. They also tend to be where people look when they think about putting in more fields, new fields for crops. The map in the upper left here gives you a sense of the extent of grasslands worldwide. This is also intended to give you, again, a sense of the diversity of animals, diversity of circumstances in which grasses are either the dominant or a co-dominant part of the vegetation of a given landscape. This is all building up to the movie Grass, okay? Domestication of wheat. So this is a key part in the story of, in Crosby's story. It's also a key part of Diamond's story if you care to read Guns, Germs, and Steel. We have to think about how this happened, why it happened, or perhaps more importantly, what kinds of features this plant brought to agriculture, features that both enabled its domestication in the first place and continue to have important implications for crops and agriculture today. So first of all, it's an annual plant. If it weren't, it would be what? A perennial plant. An annual plant completes its reproductive cycle each year. A perennial plant does not. A perennial plant may set seed, reproduce every year, but doesn't complete its entire cycle every year, right? An annual plant dies every year, and then it germinates a new generation the following year, and it in turn completes its reproductive cycle. Natural selection favors plants whose seed heads shatter on their own. What does that mean? Where's the, oh, that's a seed head up there in the upper right. Yeah. Okay, in this case, shatter means those seeds, that's a whole bunch of seeds at the top of a stalk, they fall off on their own. So what? If you're just a grass plant growing on your own, and you know that you're going to die, and your seeds have got to somehow reproduce the following year, and you have nobody else intervening, if your seeds stay there at the top of that stalk, you're going to fail, right? Because those seeds need to get off that stalk and fall to the ground or blow to some other place and get to the soil, or else they can't germinate. So under circumstances of strictly natural selection, you need to have a seed head that shatters on its own. And whether it's the wind that blows them off, or whether you like sort of self-explode and throw them off, or whether they're by the end of the growing season, they're very delicately attached so that any animal that runs past and just bumps the stalk, they'll fall off, that kind of thing. On the other hand, if you're going to domesticate this plant, the seed heads are also the part you want to eat. That's where most of the energy and nutrients in this plant are located. We don't eat the stalks and the leaves of wheat. We eat the seeds. And if you're a human and you want to grow this plant, you want the seeds to stay on the stalk, right? Until you come along and harvest them, until you come along and take them. If your seed heads shatter on their own, you'll go out there to harvest, and they all will have fallen on the ground, and you'll be reduced to picking them up one by one out of the dirt, which is it's not worth the effort, right? Clearly. So the puzzle here is sort of, I mean, on one hand, this is a puzzle, because it's hard to see how any human wandering along through a grassland would have come to the recognition that the seeds are the part that you want to eat, that the seeds are the part that you can then turn around, put in the ground, and grow, and that if you start this process, eventually you would end up with a bunch of plants that would hold their seeds on the tops of their stalks, right? Who in the world would have imagined that as, you know, a hunter-gatherer wandering through a field of grass? On the other hand, this is a beautiful illustration of the difference between artificial and natural selection, and in turn, on the meaning of domestication itself, right? Domestication is not just somehow grabbing a wild something and putting it in a field or a corral, right? It's actually altering the reproductive and biological identity of that plant or animal. What this means eventually is that you end up with a grass plant that doesn't shatter, its seed head doesn't shatter, and therefore it must be harvested by humans in order to reproduce. A wheat plant, a grass plant that has this new feature that is so attractive to humans for purposes of domestication is a plant that cannot survive without humans, and therefore is fully domesticated. It is dependent on humans for its reproduction and persistence. Does that make sense? You're still not persuaded of the importance and beauty of grasses? Maybe? The point that Crosby puts out there, and this is, again, Jared Diamond takes this whole hog and reiterates it, restates the same argument, is that Eurasia had an advantage, so to speak, compared to other parts of the world when it came to grasses, just the way it had an advantage when it came to large animals to domesticate. 32 of the world's 56 prize wild grasses, and prize here in this case refers to the productivity of the grasses in terms of seed. How much seed does a given grass plant produce? And also in terms of its other features facilitating domestication. 32 of 56 originated in, not just in Eurasia, but in a particular part of Eurasia, the Fertile Crescent and the Mediterranean region. 13 of 14 domesticated mammal species were native to Eurasia. Now, yeah, the size of seed head is also a big consideration. I don't suppose I need to go into that. A lot of grasses have got such itty-bitty teeny seeds that they would not lend themselves to useful production as a domesticated plant. Having nice big seeds is really helpful if you're worried about producing, you know, quantities of food. What are the ramifications of this Eurasian advantage? Unequal development of surplus food production is what it comes down to. The productivity of agriculture in Eurasia was much, much higher than in other parts of the world at a given point in time. Okay? It develops earlier, and it develops more rapidly in terms of output. This results in an unequal demographic and social development. Larger surpluses mean larger populations of people, or denser populations of people, a greater division of labor, and more human energy time that can be devoted to other things besides food production. Unequal technological and immunological development, unequal outcomes upon collision since 1492. And collision is Diamond's term for it, actually. The collision of old world and new world peoples, plants, germs, that kind of thing. All right, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to talk about this movie that we're going to watch on Tuesday. It's called Grass, A Nation's Battle for Life. It was made in 1925. It's a silent movie. It's got a very exuberant soundtrack of extremely low production value, but it's a silent movie. It's about the Bakhtiari, who are nomadic pastoralists. That means they live from their animals, and they move significant distances with their animals every year. They do not have any fixed settlements, cities. The movie was made by Marion Cooper, Ernest Schudsack, and Marguerite Harrison. The next movie they made was King Kong. And Marion Cooper went on to be one of the most famous early directors in Hollywood. King Kong, The Sands of Iwo Jima, Fort Apache, The Searchers, Chang, A Drama of the Wilderness. So this is one of, it's actually generally considered to be the second documentary film ever made. What's a nation? Picking up on this subtitle, A Nation's Battle for Life. What is a nation? It's defined as a community of sentiment or solidarity. It's any group of people who feel some kind of solidarity among themselves as such, as a group, right? This can be based on language, religion, ethnicity, history, livelihood. It can be defined by almost any feature of a given population. All that matters is that somehow they feel this commonality, right? They identify with each other as a people or as a nation. It's generally defined relationally. In other words, it's not just that you all have a certain, say, language or religion in common. It's that you have it in common and other people don't. You are different from other people in some important identifiable way or set of ways. So when I say nation, I don't want you to immediately think of the United States or Poland, right? Those are nation states. I want you to remember, a nation is not the same thing as a nation state. A nation state is that peculiar form in which the nation and the state become the same thing or somehow map onto each other in a nice, convenient way. I want you to think instead of the nation as at least, well, not only potentially, but frequently a separate thing. a different concept and a different reality on the ground. So the Bakhtiari are a nation without a state, essentially. Their migration every year takes them back and forth between what's now Iraq and what's now Iran. And they consider themselves citizens of neither state. So what is the state? This is Max Weber's definition. We encountered Max Weber once already when we talked about science. Now we're going to talk about something from politics as a vocation, the companion lecture he gave at about the same time. Today, however, we have to say that a state is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Underline that in your notes. Monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Note that territory is one of the characteristics of the state. The state is considered the sole source of the right to use violence. Now, this term legitimate, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is really important. What the hell does it mean? Successfully claim the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force. Yes. Okay. Okay. Legitimate here has two interestingly related meanings, right? On the one hand, what legitimate means is the state can kill you and get away with it, right? Or put you in prison. The state has the right to do that. You try to do that to somebody, and yeah, it's not going to work. You're going to get in trouble, right? You're not allowed to just blow somebody's head off. I'm sorry, I'm a little dramatic, but the state is, right? Or at least it claims that it is. And the other kind of legitimate is the part where you ask, well, is that claim successful? Right? If the state actually does it, will everyone else say, oh, yes, very good, nice job. You have enforced the law, you have punished the wrongdoer, and we think you're groovy. Or, on the other hand, is there a possibility, as it happens in Favela Rising, that when the state comes along and shoots somebody, everyone looks at him and says, wait a goddamn second. That's not legitimate at all. That was arbitrary. That person was innocent. You're not being legitimate. And what Weber is saying here is that if the state claims that monopoly, but doesn't gain the support of the people it's purporting to rule, its legitimacy is in question, right? So it needs to be able to assert this claim successfully, and its claim is not just that it can do it, its claim is also that no one else can do it. The gangs in the favela can't do it. It's a monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. So when we think about a nation state, we have to think about that community of sentiment part, and then we have to think about this legitimacy and monopoly of the use of force on the other part, and how they come together. All right, so, oh, darn it. Well, I'll show these at the beginning of class next time. Yeah, you've got them in your notes. You can look at them, but I'll run through the rest next time.